Welcome to the SpiritWoke Podcast, podcasting from the beautiful city of Stillwater, the birthplace of Minnesota. Are you going through a spiritual awakening? Do you wish to learn more about continued spiritual growth and want to meet others who are on a similar journey? We hope that this podcast and its community can be a meaningful resource for you. The SpiritWoke Podcast welcomes special guests from around the globe who share personal stories of their awakening journey, along with details of spiritual abilities they've developed along the way. So buckle up and get ready for this exciting episode. And now, here's your host, Adam Dins.
Friends, welcome back to the SpiritWoke Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Claire Marie Kohout to the show. Claire is the founder of CMK Energy, and through positivity and love, CMK Energy helps empower clients to thrive in their lives, not just survive. In Claire Marie's words, my goal is to help you live an ecstatic life full of love, divine grace, conscious awareness and alignment, and self-confidence. This life is so powerful and beautiful, and so full of magic. We have to listen, be aware, and choose our way through life carefully, and with respect to get the most we can out of every single minute. Claire Marie offers intuitive guidance to help you face life's challenges and energy therapy to aid in alignments and balance of the body, mind, and spirit so your journey can be as full and as joyful as possible. So we welcome you, Claire Marie, to the SpiritWoke Podcast.
Thank you, Adam. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you. And for those of you who may not be listening through the entirety of the show, in case you have to leave early, definitely check out Claire's website at cmkenergy.com. That's how you can find all things Claire Marie and her services and anything you want to know about Claire Marie. You can find her there. Again, it's CM is in Mary, K, energy.com. So, all right. Well, how are you doing over there?
You know, I am good. I am better this week or at least today, than I was last week or the week before. So I'm very happy to be talking to you when the sun is out and feeling pretty good.
Wonderful. Well, I am thrilled to hear that, and I guess that will make for an even better podcast recording.
I hope so.
Well, very cool. Well, so today we are going to be talking about geomancy and divination, and it's a topic that I am fascinated about, and I know I've spoken just at a very high level with Claire Marie about geomancy and divination in the past, and so I'm really excited to dive into that topic today. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, Claire Marie, would you be cool telling our listeners about your awakening experience, maybe what sparked it?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is, Adam, is I wasn't a spontaneous awakener. I was very much guided and wanting to have a spiritual life ever since I was a kid. I was raised in the Episcopal Church. My family, though my parents divorced when I was very little, my father got the church and was supported very well by the church. So he, back in the 70s, got sole custody of my sister and myself. And through that, needed help. And he reached out, and the congregation at Ascension Episcopal reached back and really supported him and became a family for us as we grew up. And I knew that I wanted my life somehow to be in service of spirit in some way. I was very much aligned for just talking about Jesus and talking about God was really important to me. I could feel it in my life very largely. I wanted to talk about it all the time. As I grew older, I became less enthralled with church as a political entity and began to see it as too limiting. And at that point, started figuring out how I defined God. And from that point forward, really started listening to my intuition, really started focusing on what my guidance was telling me versus what I was being told. And just kept kind of concentrating on that throughout my life. And through college, I, explored things. And when I became an adult, I ended up finding avenues through intuition and through spirituality that really connected me more strongly with what I like to call as pure source, right? Because that's a long story, but I refer to that God essence as pure source. And what that means for me in particular, not me as the collective. And then how do I show that then to the world, because it is important to me. And started really getting in touch with healing touch and working a lot with gifts, right? Because we are all, and I swear to God, I'm the poster child for this. And I just am really excited to talk to people who are not born with these fantastic abilities to just go out and immediately, speak to ghosts since they were a little kid. Like, if you develop this, if you put some focus and concentration on developing these gifts, it will come. We all have the ability to be intuitive, to have more than just our five senses, that we can connect on those levels. But for some of us, it takes practice. And when I teach my classes, I talk to my students about, not all of us are Mozart. Not all of us are going to be 5 years old composing, these beautiful melodies and hearing it in our head and be like the end all be all. Some of us have to practice. And even Mozart had to practice. And that's what it is most about when we drive for awakening and enlightenment, that it doesn't, sometimes it spontaneously comes, but even when it does spontaneously come, you have to understand what to do with it in order to develop it. And that's the important thing, is if this is something that you're looking for, you got to give time and effort to it. And for me, it was time and effort and diligence. And the more I put in, the more I got out of it. So that's my story of awakening. I was driven to focus.
So when you when you started going to church as a child, did you know before that you kind of had like this thirst for, I call it spirituality, and that kind of met your need, or is it something that you weren't necessarily looking for, but going to church sort of guided you to that that conclusion that you were ready for a deeper relationship with God or with Source, whatever it was that was in your heart at that time?
That's a twofold question, because if you would have asked me as a young adult, I would have said it was church. It was the love that I felt when I was there, and what that community brought to me, which I still think is the only reason people should go to church, is for the community. I know that I'm going to probably make a lot of people angry about that, but it's true.
Not on this podcast.
Right? I think that church can be incredibly powerful for the community that it involves. But I think a lot of the politics and anyway, that can be damaging and sometimes limiting. And that's what it felt like to me. But as I developed more of my gifts, I had remembering happening. And what I would remember is that when I was very young and I'd go by myself, hang out in the woods, hang out with nature, I had a remembering of spirits such as, for instance, fairy energy. that I would be aware of when I was out in the woods. And that I remember recalling that when I would go looking for it when I was a kid, it didn't look like Tinkerbell. So I kind of dismissed what it was supposed to look like, right? Because I had an idea in my head what a fairy looks like. It looked like Tinkerbell. It looked like the fairies in the Squished Fairy book. It looked like the fairies and the ghouls and goblins from the fairy tales that my mom would read me from the Grimm brothers. That's what that looked like. And so I dismissed it. Well, when I was, probably 36, my wife and I went and picked out a Christmas tree. I'm hoping it's okay I tell this story.
Yeah, of course.
We went and picked out a Christmas tree, and every year we go to Santa's Evergreens to pick out our tree. It's a family-run tree farm that takes amazing care of their land and of their trees. I have never been around such happy trees as on this family's plot of land. It just feels really good. They take excellent stewardship. And we went to go cut down a tree, and there was this tree that was calling to us, like, take me. Like, I couldn't, it was so loud that I went like through the aisle, the pathways that they had, till I found this tree. I'm like, this is the tree we have to take home. And so we cut it down. It was super happy to come with us. We brought it home, we put it up, and it was like busting at the seams. This tree was so amazing. And even without it lit, it was glorious. And what I realized is it has fairies in it. And not only could I see them, but my cat could see them. And when I would see that this fairy energy would move around the tree and was in the tree, the cat would follow where I would see it. And so I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is the greatest thing in the entire world, that I am able to experience what this was. And I made the connection. This is fairy. When I said it out loud, it was the truth. And I knew that that's what it was. And I recognized that energy I would play with out in the woods when I was a kid. But it took me to 36 to have that remembering. So is it church that brought me there? I don't think so. I think that it was something that was always in my life, that church was allowed me to open up my heart to love, and therefore satisfied and satiated that longing that my heart had to be reunited or connected with the divine. And then, of course, that sort of crumbled when it became limiting, especially to me as the LGBT community and as a woman, that some of those things that they teach in church, whether they are agreed with or not, they still pass it down, and it's really hard for me to swallow. And so I realized I didn't have to have that stepping stone between me and the divine. I have that ability. We all do. We can all connect, and we don't need someone else to be the mediator between us and source. And that's when things really clicked for me and allowed me to open more strongly to what that entailed. Because when we open up our senses and we allow ourselves to fully bring in information regarding source, we end up activating the pineal and pituitary gland in our brain that allows us to see in greater detail with extrasensory perception that we've always found kind of latent. And that's when things really started coming together. I when I was over in Scotland, I had some amazing experiences with time travel and being in these castles and having experiences and having, psychometry happen. And the more I was given a view of what that looked like, the more I understood how I see or how I know or how I hear. That allowed me to continue to open. And that led me to teaching others that no one can really tell you how it has to work for you. You really have to pay attention to find out how it works for you. I can't say. What I can do is I can give you my experience and the experience of other people and see if that helps you find your way to your own gifts. But it really comes with diligence and work to allow that to really open and flourish and become an absolute part of your everyday life.
Yeah, that's powerful. I know. I love hearing stories about people who have come from, more formal religious backgrounds, and I say religious intentionally, but kind of come into spirituality. I know I had a similar route, not a similar route, but growing up, my family wasn't religious. I was brought up, and my entire family is Jewish, and but really not my immediate family. My mom and dad were not practicing. Right. My mom was a little bit like I am now, a very hippy dippy kind of spiritual, free spirit. She practiced transcendental meditation. She would always talk about her spirit guides, but I didn't live with my mom because my mom had addiction problems, and so my dad had. That's part of the journey. But I live with my dad, and my dad, he was pretty much an atheist most of his life. But what that did is it allowed me, with that being said, I had a really open, not open, but just a hunger, a thirst, a desire to, for whatever reason, to figure out spirituality, who is God? What is God? What is this thing? And I was always so drawn to this concept of God. And I know I've shared this on the podcast before, but, I'd lay in bed at night, and I lived in South Florida at the time, and, it would always rain and storm. I mean, that's South Florida for you, but and as the rain would come at night, when I'd be laying in bed, I would say, Jesus, if you're God, send a bolt of lightning right now. Let me see it. And I'd wait, and nothing would come. And then I'd say, Buddha, if you're God, and I'd run through all the different God archetypes and say, just trying to figure out who it is. And then I ended up, kind of just exploring a variety of faiths. And at 17, I did the thing that most, at least back then, Jewish parents were deathly afraid of, which was I converted to Christianity. It made everybody very happy. And I practiced, probably for 4 or 5 years, very devoutly, and not religiously, but I really believed, and I really had a relationship with God through that. And looking back on it, and actually now talking to you for the first time about it in this light, it's interesting because what I'm getting is that I really did have a relationship with the same source energy that I have now. It was just, in my mind, just a different paradigm, a different archetype. But anyway,
that's a beautiful way to put it, Adam, because in reality, that's kind of what it is. That's what ancient philosophy and wisdom would teach us. I mean, that's right now with science, we can find out that, the god of lightning, right, isn't necessarily Zeus, but what they were looking for was something greater than themselves that they knew that was beyond their recognition, and we're trying to grasp that connection. And back in ancient Greek and Roman times, all of that, they became archetypes. And because I think as humans, we need to make those connections, we tend to think of it as another sort of human space. And so that's how God ended up being developed. Now, being an ex-Christian, the thing that, not even ex-Christian, I don't know that I would say that either, but I have a relationship with Jesus, right? I am very aware that he was a person. I have connected with him. I talk to him regularly, but also Mary Magdalene. Like, these are people that actually existed. So I can't be like, I'm going to completely eradicate all of that understanding, because I know I've connected with this essence before. So I can't not count myself as a believer in some of that, because it's there and I know it. So I can't necessarily discount it. But at the same time, I also don't think that the God that is written in the Bible doesn't have a lot of distortion, because those distortions came through word of mouth and telling, like telephone, even through the different translations, even through the ancient texts. They're coming through other people's perspectives. And in order for me to understand, I have to come and get as clear as possible in myself and bring that information through as clearly as possible without those distortions, to completely understand what the divine is without being an archetype. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for those of us who have moved on from, any of the traditional religions, and when I say moved on, I don't mean that and I'm better than you, because we're all on our own journey, and we're all, wherever we are, we're supposed to be. If we're in church singing, praises to Jesus, or we're in a temple, listening to a rabbi, or we're in a mosque, we are where we're supposed to be. And there's none of us that are any better or any far ahead or behind than anyone else is. I just, from my own personal take and experience, when we, for me at least, when I moved on from the church, similar to you, I ended up seeing some of the political side of it, which to me just was like, okay, cool, I'm ready to move on now. But as I've sort of matured in spirituality, and I've seen this happen with other people from a variety of different faiths, it's so fascinating. And I had asked you that question a while ago about whether, you always had this hunger for God, or you found it once you were at church, because it's interesting. It's just so fascinating to me how some people always have that hunger, and they go on this spiritual journey to find that what it is they're looking for. And then you have other people who just never, who never really thought about it, or even people who are atheists, who just, whatever. And one day, they have this experience, and they open up, and it's like, wait a minute. It's like a 180 turn from I don't believe, or I don't have any relationship with spirit, to just being completely floored. And I just love that there is so much diversity. And that's why I asked, but
I think so too. I think that the diversity is part of the deliciousness of being able to break down those limitations, and to understand that what we do have in common is the kind of the right stuff.
Yep.
Right? Like, to have all of these different diverse groups and ideas, and then go, okay, we all have these commonalities, and those commonalities really come down to source.
Yep.
And the only time it doesn't come down to source are those who are very atheistic and don't necessarily believe that there's any intelligence, or which, is fine, or any spiritual aspect, again, which is fine. But I'll tell you what, one of the most amazingly I would say, atheists that I know of is Ricky Gervais. Have you ever seen his series, The Afterlife?
No.
On Netflix? Oh, I highly recommend it. It is such a spiritual journey for this man. And he is absolutely an acclaimed atheist. And it really is amazing to me that from my perspective, what he's going through is a spiritual journey. And what he thinks he's going through is a journey through grief. I'm like, those are to me, it's the same thing. We just are talking about it in different words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that I look forward to. I'll have to check that out. It is really interesting to see nowadays, especially with all of this information that we have.
Yep.
I feel like 20, 30 years ago, we didn't really have as much information about, the types of practices that you are so good at. But now we do, and it's public, and with the internet, it's a lot easier to get that information out. But I was watching this TED Talk, and I'll share it on the SpiritWoke Facebook page. So just go to facebook.com/official SpiritWoke. But on that, it was a video. It's a TEDx speech from a doctor, an MD, who says that he's not spiritual, he's not religious, but he was sharing stories. He works with those who are dying,
Right.
and he has, for the past, I can't remember how many years it was, but he studied people who are very close to death and the visions and the dreams that they had. And he actually put data behind it through interviews and statistical analysis. And he's come to the conclusion that there is something, even though he doesn't necessarily know what it is. The consistency of the visions that people have before they die, about who they see and what messages they're given all over the world, regardless of religion, regardless of belief.
Yep.
And so, anyway, I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but that's.
It is, and I'm so sorry, but this is so. I love talking about this. So thank you for putting us back online.
Yeah, no, I could talk about this all day too, but I want to get to the topic that we came here to talk about today, which is it's a unique form of divination, and it's
Correct.
It's called geomancy, and hopefully I pronounced that appropriately. But would you mind, Claire, talking to us a little bit about what it is and how it works, and I'll try to fill in some questions in between.
Absolutely. The interesting thing about geomancy is that a lot of times where you're going to get the most information is through the Golden Dawn, which is a kind of an occult function. They're a secret society that do a lot of ritual magic. They are the ones that really, Stephen Skinner in particular is a gentleman who has kept this form of divination alive. And I'm very grateful for it because it is a way for us to be able to use divination that connects us with our ancient ancestors. And however, because it's old, right now we're going through energy, some vibrational frequency amp ups. We're going to higher and higher frequencies of energy, and I am trying to bring geomancy into that higher frequency of energy. So using it with today's energy, with a nod to our ancestors. And the important thing to know for any sort of divination is all that divination is a different perspective of circumstances, so that you're able to see any given situation from a different perspective. And from seeing something from that point of view, it gives you more information about how to lead, right? So this geomancy is geo of the earth, and mancy as in divination, as in looking forward. So, and it's old. It goes all the way back to ancient Africa, and tribal leaders that would use this to help them understand, with use of the earth and the planets and the heavens and the stars, and to be able to get some information with all of that, everything that they could use around them, to be able to then get all of that information and put it into play to make sure that they're making the best possible decision for themselves, their tribes, their families, all of that kind of stuff, because they didn't have a lot to go off of. And it allowed them a deeper perspective by being able to connect with planetary intelligence, i.e., Venus, Jupiter, Mars, all of those that have and energetic behind it, and their relationship with the earth, and then earth itself having an energy, and being able to understand that as humans, we're not the only ones in play. The earth has something to say to us about that, taking all of that information and then charting it. And the very interesting thing is that as you create figures in geomancy, it's almost like the symbols for different planets that you would get in astrology. So there's figures that are based on binary code, odds and evens. And that binary code, then when you place those all together and create a map, we call it a chart or a shield, you create that shield, it gives you information through the shield coming out with a judge, which gives you the answer to the question. What kind of outcome is going to happen, right? And actually, one thing I was thinking of that if you're open to doing is, I was thinking I should probably do a geomantic divination as to a local outcome for the coronavirus, right? Everybody's so up in arms and so stressed about what's happening with the coronavirus. I didn't even think about doing a geomantic divination as to how, what is our outcome? Like, what can we expect in the outcome of this pandemic as a human species? And even locally, like in the Midwest or in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and see if we can get some potential answers. And the reason I haven't done that yet is because I've been given information in a different way that I've actually connected to that has calmed me and my family, so that I didn't have to do a geomantic divination, but I should go ahead and do one and see what the outcome of the geomancy is. And then if I could take a picture and scan it to you, if you want to put it on your website or the Facebook for the day that we're doing the podcast, I'd be happy to give some so that people can see what it would look like through a chart. Is that possible? Can we do that?
Yeah, that would be awesome. So are you suggesting doing that right now?
Well, I'll do it. I'll do it when we're off, so I won't take the time.
Okay.
To do the chart, but I will do that. I will, and I'll write out how I do the question, and I'll write everything down so everybody can see it, and I'll send that information to you so that people can see how that starts from, how it goes from start to finish.
Yeah. So why don't you do that? And so if you're listening to the podcast now, you can go to SpiritWoke.com and find Claire's episodic page. If you can't find it, just search for the word Claire, Claire, in the search bar, and you'll find her episode. And click on that link, and that page will have the image and all of the written description of what Claire is talking about, so you can see exactly what she's talking about. And we'll also post it on Facebook and on Instagram as well. So it's official Spirit Woke on each of those platforms. So definitely, absolutely. So Claire, would you kind of just walk us through the process? Like, how does just to help Claire, because I think it may be difficult for people to kind of understand how the process of geomancy works. Can you maybe just talk us through the process?
Yes. And this is funny because I talk about this at the different shows that I do, and because I'm trying to get people to understand that this is a thing that they can be aware of. And there's, I really apologize for all those podcast listeners whose eyes all of a sudden start to glaze over because it's kind of a lengthy process. But what it does is you need originally an earthbound way to be able to read the figures and get the binary code. And what that means is you want something of the earth. They used to use sticks and mud and leaves and all those kinds of things to be able to cast, to be able to get this information. For me, I had a brilliant artist that I know make me some, what I call my sticks. And they're wood sticks about 3 inches long. that have on one side of my aspen wood is an inlay of some willow from another tree of one stripe. And on the other side of that stick is 2 stripes of willow wood. And so each stick that I have, and there's 4 of them, has a 1 or a 2. And as you cast them, though, that binary code creates a figure. And that figure, there's only a certain number of figures that can come out of those 4 items being cast. And as you cast those, you create on your sheet what we call the mothers. The mothers then create the daughters. The daughters then create the nieces. The nieces create the witnesses. The witnesses create the judge. So you're taking that binary code and delineating it through the chart to create basically an outline of how your question is going to unfold. And from there, you find out the judge, which not only is the outcome, but it is also in relation to you and the question that you ask. So it's important to know that that question is, you have to put it in relationship. Everything is in relationship. So it's, even though it may feel like a solid yes or no, or a solid figure, you getting into a place where you take it into context with the entire shield. Because you could have a judge, for instance, there is a figure in geomancy called Carcer. And Carcer is a figure that is not necessarily a good figure, because it can mean being bound, being held, being imprisoned.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me stop you real quick. So you said there's like a shield in a chart. Is the shield in the chart the same thing?
It is.
Okay.
It is. According to geomancy, it's almost like, it is. It's, you'll see. It'll be easier to see when I send in that for you to see, okay, and the listeners to see, because it literally looks like a shield.
And then within the shield or the chart, is that where these figures are that you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, yep. Cool. So if you wouldn't mind taking a step back, so you cast these. So essentially, you ask a question.
The question is very important, which is why not a lot of people actually get geomantic divination when I am at shows, because a lot of them don't have a specific question in mind. As specific as you can get question is what you need for divination. And, or for this particular kind of divination, you need to have an answer or a question that you're answering. And so to just sit down and be like, I don't know, just tell me what I need to know, doesn't really fly with geomantic divination. There really needs to be a question that is asked.
Okay, so we ask a question, and then there are these 2 wooden rods, right, that have the binary, the one,
the ones and the twos.
The ones and the twos, 1 on one side and 2 on the other. So, and then so you cast. So is it for each question? Do you cast the 4 pieces of wood once?
You cast them 4 times.
Okay, so 4. So you essentially get 16 different casts.
Yes.
Okay.
So you cast. You've got 4 mothers, okay? And that's where we start. You cast 1, that's the first mother. You cast twice, all 4, that is the second mother. You cast a 3rd time, that's the 3rd mother. You cast a 4th time, that's the 4th mother. And so each one of those wooden sticks has an element to the mother. So the first mother is going to have a 1 or a 2, we'll say a 1. And then the second stick is going to have a 1. and the third stick is going to have a 2, and the fourth stick is going to have a 1. So when you draw dot, dot, double dot, dot, that is a figure. That figure means puer or boy.
Okay,
And
so are you saying that each different derivative or possibility of what that dot dot double dot dot or double dot dot double dot dot, there's a meaning or a figure behind each of those potential outcomes?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So so for each of those, you kind of associate them with a mother.
Yes.
Okay.
So each mother, so you cast 4 times, you get your 4 mothers. From there, you take those 4 mothers and you no longer cast. What you do is you take those 4 mothers and you then move toward the daughters. And the mothers' figures create the daughter figures. So the first daughter, I know this is so interesting to talk about on podcast. The first daughter is made up of all the heads of the mothers. So if each mother, each of the 4 mothers has a single dot at the head, the first daughter is going to have dot, 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 which is a figure out of its own.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And so you do that, you create your daughters. From there, you go down, you create nieces from your daughters and nieces from your mothers. And from there, you create witnesses from your nieces by combining those figures together. And then they create figures for the witnesses. And the witnesses, you put those together to create your judge.
Got it. Okay, so the mother essentially works its way down. So everything is a derivative of the mother until you get to the judge. So it's almost like a division, a long division problem, right? So like you do 5 into 105, and then it goes to the next row, and you keep working down your rows until you get to your final. Okay, that makes sense. So it really is a process of getting from that mother state down to the judge state, and then with the judge state is where you get your answer.
Absolutely. And that judge state also represents the future. So it's what is to come, and then your relationship, the asker's relationship with the question. So there's a lot to be considered when you look at what it's not just, that's a bad outcome, right? There's only a certain couple of figures that are like, okay, start again because this is not good. The rest of them, you have to put it into perspective. So like I was saying about Carcer, which is dot, double dot, double dot, dot. Pardon me. If that were in the judge place, that is about being imprisoned or being bound. Now, depending on what your question is, that might be exactly what you need. You may need to set some boundaries, right? Depending on your question.
Yep.
So even though Carcer can be a negative or a unlikable figure, you have to take it into context of what you're asking and what comes before and after it, what comes before it. And that comes to into some interpretation, right? Just like as if you go to a reader of anything, you're getting even the tarot, you're getting an interpretation of what that says. And with geomancy, however, I believe it's a lot easier, because a lot of that interpretation is taken care of for you through the charting process. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat.
No worries. It does happen on the podcast.
Right? Oh, well, I feel like I've been talking for hours. I'm so sorry.
No. Keep going.
Okay. So it becomes something that people can do at home, right? Because one of the reasons people come to readers or to me, because they need help finding their way out of a situation, right? I mean, that's really what is happening. Is most of the time when when someone comes to me for a reading, they already know the answer to what they're asking. What they need is confirmation. right? And they just get so muddled and mixed up in their everyday stuff that they're having a hard time seeing it themselves. I do that as well. I get so mired down in what I'm doing and what's going on with my family that everything is too close and I need help from an outside perspective to be able to tell me. And I go to a reader for that. I go and say, okay, what's your take on this? Here's my situation. Let's read for this. And they'll go, okay. They'll do whatever they do, whether it's cards or just hold my hand or whatever. It gets them that information. And then from there, we do a reading and I get clarity. And that's really what we do as readers and as people who are in touch with our intuition, is nothing that you can't do at home, except sometimes, just like when you go to the doctor, you need help getting an outside perspective.
Right.
And geomancy can do that for you. Geomancy can give you that outside perspective because your interpretation is really limited to this many figures, right?
Right.
And when we talk about Carcer, we're talking about being imprisoned or being bound. So there's not a whole lot of different avenues in which you can really read that. It just happens you have to take it into context with what's around it to say, yeah, this is going to be a hard future for you because you need to set boundaries, or it's going to be something where you feel very imprisoned. So I would maybe make a different choice. But it really comes to just getting clarity. It's just about getting clarity and being able to use everything at your disposal to get that clarity.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds too, while there is some level of interpretation from you, the reader, it is a lot more clear in some ways than getting just a pure reading where everything is sort of the interpretation of the messages coming in, because the casting of remind me what the name of the sticks were again?
I'd honestly just call them sticks.
Okay. So the casting of the sticks, you get something sort of concrete there, right? There's no ambiguity. You get your patterns, and then obviously as you kind of work it down to you work it down to where the judges are, and then that answer is what gets there's some level of translation for, but at least there's some structure behind it to kind of get you to a place where it's really in an informed. And I'm not saying that by any means that psychics and mediums who have this amazing ability to be intuitive are any less effective than this. It's just a different way. It's just a different, it's more of an earth-based, I'd almost say shamanic type of practice versus, just relying on the messages coming in through our crown. Correct. So for instance, I did a reading a while ago. This is one of my favorite readings that I talk about because when I do readings, you're decoding information. I get visual information a lot of the times as a clairvoyant. So I'll get visual information. Sometimes it does come in through my body. Sometimes I do get it as a knowing clairaudience, but a lot of times it's clairvoyance and I get images. And I'm reading for this woman who sits down and says, I'm needing some information about my boyfriend. And I get just these most beautiful visions of food, like roast chicken and beautiful vegetables and spiced cherries and all of this food. And I'm going, okay, what does this have to, so what does your boyfriend do? And she's like, oh, he does financing or something. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's try this again because I have no idea how to make this equal finance, right? I have no idea why I'm getting this information for boyfriend. So I connect with her again and I get cakes and pastries and pies and just this just glorious smorgasbord of food. And I'm going, I don't know what to do with this. It just keeps coming. Just all of this food just keeps coming. And no matter what question I ask about the boyfriend, it's not making any sense. So finally I said, okay,
I just have to ask. I said, what's with the food? I said, all I am getting is food. And I described some of the food to her, and she goes, oh my God. She goes, Claire Marie, I want to know if I need to go back to culinary school, but I chickened out to ask, so I asked my boyfriend instead. And I went, okay, well, that makes a lot more sense. Yes, you need to be going to culinary school. Whatever, if boyfriend's going to be able to support you on that, huzzah. If he's not, let him go. You need to be working with food in your life. Like 100%, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be delicious. You're going to be speaking to the world through your artwork, which is food. Like, do this. This is not even a question in my mind that you will be successful at this.
Right.
But that comes with interpretation, right? Like
right.
If I hadn't asked that question, I'm going to try to figure out what does this mean in accordance to that question.
Right.
And with geomancy, the question is so important. There's no doubt about what you're asking about. And then it will answer what that question is, not necessarily what you're getting from that person's energy. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
So it answers the question versus, for me, if I were to do just a regular intuitive reading, there's a lot more that gets implied because we're talking about, how I see their energy field and what kind of visions I'm getting and what kind of information I'm getting from their guides, and all of that there's room for error there. Whereas is geomancy, you really don't have that much room for error when it comes to that exact question. Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it'll be I think everyone, I highly recommend, now that you're listening to this, going to the page, going to Claire's SpiritWoke podcast page and checking out a real life example related to coronavirus, our favorite topic of the day. And see what's going on there, because I'm interested to see what that looks like as well. And so Claire Marie, do you do this virtually as well, or does someone have to be with you in person to do this?
To do geomancy?
Yes.
No, we can absolutely do it virtually, 100%. And now this actually we're going to for the podcast, right?
That's right. That's true.
So we're gonna ask the question. We can even write it down together if you would like. So we can actually. Do we have time for this, Adam?
We sure do. We have about 5 more minutes. Okay. So let's rock it.
So if we ask the question, what will be the outcome of the local? What is it, like outbreak? Of what's the other word for coronavirus? The COVID-19.
The COVID-19, yeah.
COVID-19. So we're asking local here, which when I think of local, I think of basically the tri-state area, right? How is it going to affect us in the Midwest, right? So let's actually write that. What will be the outcome of the outbreak of COVID-19 in the Midwest?
Perfect.
And then this is an interesting part that we did not talk about, is that we want to protect that question, okay? We want to protect that question through the planetary intelligences. And that's one of my favorite things about geomantic divination is looking to see which of the sigils that we're going to use regarding the question as close as we can with the planetary intelligence. So, for instance, Mars concerns itself with war, struggle, fighting, victory, weapons. And Jupiter is concerned with fortune, general happiness, church matters, holding office is like in an organization, money, bounty, spiritual matters. Saturn actually is very closely linked to crops, bereavement, sorrow or loss or death. Mercury is concerned with science, learning, thievery, knowledge, books. Venus is concerned with love, music, pleasure, and luxury. The moon is with traveling, fishing, childbirth, or reproduction, and also is with huge changes. And the sun is concerned with music, feasting, success, power, and rulership. So when you look at all of those different aspects, actually what I think the planetary intelligence that I'm going to use is the moon. And I think I'm going to use the moon because of the huge amount of change that this particular pandemic is creating in our world. And that tidal change, that big shift is what we're concerned with as far as the outcome of this virus. And because of that, I think the moon would be the right one to protect this question. So I'm going to write that sigil. I'm going to draw that sigil on the back of the sheet, and I will send this I'll write this down so that everybody can see it. And we're going to put a big circle around it. And from there, our question is now protected. It is now being governed and watched over by the moon. And the moon will help guide us in the outcome. So now from here, what I'm going to do is sit with that question, and then I will cast the sticks, and then I will create the shield, and I will take a picture of the front, and I'll take a picture of the back, and I'll write out what all of that means, and I will send it to you in an email.
Excellent. Maybe something else we can do if you're game.
Yeah.
So maybe right when this podcast launches, we can do a Facebook Live together on the SpiritWoke Facebook page, and maybe you can just walk us through it as well if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that.
Okay, cool. So those of you guys listening in, definitely, now that I'm happy we waited to the end here to with that idea, check out our Facebook page, and you'll see Claire in action, just kind of explaining the results and showing us and giving us an illustrative description. And then what I can even do is take that video from the Facebook page and embed it on the podcast page as well once we've recorded it. So we'll have, so that'll work out well. So Claire and I will coordinate that. But with that being said, we've been talking almost an hour already. So it is time for us to wrap. But Claire Marie, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this topic. I know it's kind of a paradigm shifter for many people. It's a new way of thinking about divination, and I'm really excited about the different ways we've talked about it and the different things that we have coming up that people will be able to see it in action. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Adam. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that we can do it again.
Yes, absolutely. And check Claire Marie out again at CMK. So the letter C, M is in Mary, K is in K, energy, kitchen. There you go. You can see I'm really on point today. So it's cmkenergy.com. And with that, my friends, we will talk very soon. Be well and take care of yourselves.
Thanks for listening to the SpiritWoke Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check out our website, spiritwoke.com, and connect with the SpiritWoke community on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search SpiritWoke. Join us next time for another edition of the SpiritWoke Podcast. Namaste.